Hi, my name's Oliver Page. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'd like to show you my home. The house opens up straight into the kitchen, kind of dining room, I suppose. This was a separate room originally, and that was one of the first things that I did when we got here, was to remove the walls and open the place up, which is kind of a lovely sense of space. I think there's really nice light coming in from both sides. It's a shame to have a front door open straight into the house, but that was a kind of necessary concession to get a sense of space and light that I wanted. This is, I suppose, the dining area. It's not quite a room as it's combined with the kitchen. I suppose my taste is pretty eclectic, and a lot of that is governed by my work traveling. I do a lot of work in and out of the BBC and have done for the last 20 years. Wherever I go to places around the world, I usually try and find something to bring back as a kind of memento of my travels, and I think that's kind of reflected quite fully in the items of furniture here. So I've got a lot of plants, and I think there's a sort of a part of my subconscious that has always really valued my experiences filming with communities in the Amazon or on islands in the South Pacific. And I've tried to kind of recreate my own little jungle experience or oasis in London. This headdress is very special to me. I was filming with a community in the Amazon called the Ashaninkas and lived there for 4 to 6 weeks. And at the end of the trip, the chief presented me with this headdress, and I had to give him something in return. And I actually had a jumper that my grandmother had knitted, which I was wearing in the evenings where it was actually occasionally getting a little bit cold. So we had a ceremonial exchange of gifts. He, I think, or either his father had made this and my grandmother had made this jumper, so it was considered a worthy exchange. I'm very influenced by natural textures as well, as part of things that would sort of complement this kind of idea of quite a natural environment. There's a lot of wood. I've got a lot of kind of fossils and minerals. I've got a collection of Neolithic arrowheads, which everyone laughs at when I tell them that I actually have a collection of Neolithic arrowheads. Again, just little reminders of our place in kind of history, and also, items that I think are individually very beautiful in their own right. One of my favourite things about the house is the light that comes in from the north and the south side. Also, the combination of the two is particularly interesting and really nice as the sun moves around the house at different times of year. Different pockets are lit up at different times of year, and there's something really beautiful in that, where in midwinter the low sun will suddenly illuminate something on the mantelpiece that I haven't seen in that light since the year before. The kitchen's pretty small and simple, but one of my favourite things is my coffee grinder, which I actually appropriated from my parents' house. Yeah, it's one of my favourite things. Use it too many times a day to fuel a coffee addiction. But yeah, really beautiful object. So I actually studied Japanese at university, Japanese language, not a media degree, which perhaps I sort of should have done, but my experiences in Japan, I spent a year there and a year abroad, have very much shaped a lot of my outlook on life. And there are many pieces around the house, from Japanese prints to Japanese flag. There's this bizarre kind of signage, which is a bicycle parking station. I found that in, I think it's an area of Tokyo called Jimbocho, which is the bookshop and printmaking district. I inherited a rather bad habit of buying antique glass to use as everyday glassware from my father, and have lots and lots of different glasses of different types, shapes and sizes, mostly bought from Portobello down the road. This is the living room. This is my living room. Again, lots of plants, lots of kind of wood and quite sort of natural tones. This sofa is probably my favourite place to sit. It's actually a drop arm sofa from Scotland that these things go all the way down, so you can kind of sit either way, look out the window, contemplate existence, life, the best and worst of everything. A lot of the artwork around the house is etchings and prints. I used to etch as a kid at school, and weirdly that kind of infiltrated through to my kind of taste in art later in life. I suppose the whole house is also very much influenced by a family friend who I grew up with as a child, and their father collected Japanese art. He was one of the first people to bring Japanese prints to the UK. He was also an expert in sort of South Asian antiquities and things, and their house was like walking around the British Museum. The sense of space was something that I was just sort of fell in love with the moment I walked into this house. And actually this was the first thing I bought, as I knew I didn't want to have a TV in sight at any point. So I found this old French armoire, which somehow perfectly fits the TV, which is sort of hidden inside, with a record collection as well. I'm really proud of these fireplaces. They weren't here when I arrived, and a friend of mine had a batch of marble. Somehow it emerged that he had sort of engineering and construction skills, and we built these fireplaces. There are two down here and there's one upstairs in my room. One of my, again, favourite things is this hi-fi system, which I bought from this wonderful shop in Hampstead called Audio Gold. Big shout out to the lads there. These are old studio speakers, sort of 40 years old, and it's an incredibly rich sound, and I don't have an ear to truly appreciate it, but I always like it when people who do have an ear come round and they just stop and tell me that the sound quality is amazing, and you know, that makes me happy. These hats are children's hats from China. I was filming with the BBC, doing a series about fire and the early history of the planet, and one morning walked past this sort of tiny little village shop that had all these hats lined up. I think it was an entire bin of them. Anyway, I bought these ones and then ran off to the shoot. That's pretty much everything on the ground floor. Upstairs we've got bedrooms and bathrooms. This is my bedroom. Again, this was 2 rooms when we arrived, but this room was pretty small, and I work a lot from home. I knew I wanted a really kind of calm place to work, so I decided to open the whole thing up and put a little study in this side, looking out over the garden. Again, there are lots of plants in here, beyond, you know, the ideal that it refreshes the air. Again, I wanted to be living and sleeping in a jungle. The art, again, there's a lot of stuff from different places in the world. I've got these 2 boards from China. I think that was in the same town that I got the hats, downstairs. This bowl is made by a friend of mine, artist Jacob van der Beugel. I have extracted many pieces of his art over the course of my life and a long-standing friendship with him. We've made films together as well. There's a few pieces downstairs, but he's a very talented artist and makes beautiful things. I worked on a series with David Attenborough for a year to 18 months at Kew Gardens, which was a phenomenal experience, as you might imagine. And afterwards, I took the liberty of writing him letters, and he wonderfully wrote back on a number of occasions. I sent him some fossils for his birthday once, and I've got a couple of the letters that he wrote back to me, just to remind me of the experience and inspire me to do more. Beyond filming with Attenborough, one of my happiest memories was filming with a community in Vanuatu on the island of Tanna. And there were 5 people that we primarily spent all our time with, and then facilitated a delegation to try and go to meet Obama to tell him that the world's actions were affecting their climate and their crops. Anyway, after this sort of 2-month experience with these guys, they all gave me one of their personal feathered plumes, and then one for myself to represent us as a group of 6. So I got that framed, and it means a lot. Over here, this is the 3rd fireplace, which in the beginning I was slightly terrified of the red tones in it, being slightly afraid of colour. As you see, most of the walls are white, although this is actually, it's called something ridiculous like Rich Praline 4, which a friend of mine who is an interior decorator told me that I simply had to have, and I slightly laughed at the suggestion of putting a paint on the walls that had such a ridiculous name. But I take it all back and I completely love it, and in different light, it has these kind of purpley hues that change. So this half of the room looks purple, that side looks another colour, and the fireplace fits kind of perfectly with that. So it was a really kind of happy surprise, along with my strange pinkish plant. I don't know what that is, but it seems to be quite happy there. This textile's from Samarkand. I didn't go there at all. I found it in Portobello, but I bought it when I was about 15 years old. There's a wonderful shop that's still there, an Afghan shop run by a family that have been there forever. I think one of their kids sold it to me when he was probably about 15 or 16, and he's now kind of knocking on the door of 45 or 50. It's a really beautiful piece, and mostly inspired by, again, like the family that I grew up opposite, where their house was filled with textiles from all over the world. And I always kind of wanted something that would reflect that aesthetic. And when I found this, I dragged my friend's dad down to the shop and I said, look, is this as old as they suggest it is? And is this a good price? And he just said, look, if you don't buy it, I will. So that was enough for me. And yeah, I've had it for now 20 plus years, 30 years. I moved here about 6 years ago, and the last place I lived in was slightly more chaotic. There was stuff everywhere, all over every surface, and I loved that, but there was a slight sense of clutter. And when I moved here and had everything in boxes, I just, in the slow way that I accumulated furniture, where I didn't, I was still buying chairs and sofas, last year, I took the view that I needed to take time to find the things that I really loved rather than going out and buying everything at once. So I lived in quite an empty space for a while, which was actually really lovely as well. And then although you'd buy an item that you really liked, by putting it in the room, you'd feel that you'd lost a sense of space and light and things. Part of the process of clearing up was to try and get some of all these tiny things that were just exploding out over my previous place into one place. And so I got these two cabinets, which actually I found online, matching ones, and have filled them with lots of my kind of small, strange things that I've collected over the years. Everything from some little figures that I made as a 5-year-old child in an art class at school, to a collection of old lighters that I used to buy in Portobello as a child. Again, I'd go down there with my father on a Saturday to the market, and I think he was quite bemused as to why his kind of 10-year-old child was buying antique lighters. I've always bought back lots of masks as an easy thing, as a souvenir from places, and then decided that possibly the best place to store them would be in a bathroom, which I think a lot of people find quite odd. If they were to ever have a bath here and they've got 50 sets of eyes staring at them, but it's kind of fun. And I've got a few plants in here as well. There's a really lovely stained glass there made by, I think, this wonderful old gentleman who actually recently sadly passed away, but he had the last stained glass shop in Kensal Rise. This is my garden, which is a little sanctuary of garden love. My parents are very, very keen gardeners, and I spend a lot of time on the phone to my mother talking about plants. I try and eat outside whenever I can. These tables are actually from Kempton Market, another Kempton purchase. From what I understand, they came from Oktoberfest in Germany, and I've seen them around London. The local pub around the corner has a load as well, and apparently someone shipped them over for a wedding for kind of 400 people and then got rid of them, sold them to a dealer at Kempton, who then sold them to everyone in London. So the people that have them all have a little part of a wedding that started in Oktoberfest. We conclude this tour with me standing in my socks in the middle of my lawn. I hope you've had an enjoyable time, not been too bored. Don't forget to follow along for more interior design and property tours.